Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here and thanks for tuning into the session today. We are truly honored and excited to bring this topic to you. I'm Praveen Gururaja. I'm the business strategy lead within the Global Customer Success Organization, focusing on AI infrastructure. And with me co-presenting today are my incredible colleagues, Rajini and Stephen. Today, we have a lot to cover. Over the past 18 months, we've been working very closely with our customers on their AI journey, where we have gathered some key learnings, insights, and some best practices. In this session, we'll share those insights and how we have packaged this into a framework with some exciting demos. Please submit your questions and we'll be monitoring and we'll respond accordingly. So let's begin. If we start off with the market potential, generative AI is poised to create $1.3 trillion in new economic value by 2032, with a compound annual growth rate of 59.1%. Organizations like yours and even Microsoft are betting on it to increase revenue, enhance customer experience, optimize supply chain, improve productivity, and reduce cost. However, if we look at organizations, only 35% of them today have a clear strategy to derive value from these AI engagements. If we think about the reasons behind it, Bain did a research where they interviewed 2,000 executives to identify the top factors that are hindering AI adoption. And the 5 things that stood out were platform agility, cost predictability, talent management, data privacy regulation and compliance, and then finally, demonstrating a tangible ROI and business outcome. And when we show this to our customers, they do agree that these common themes resonate, and those are the top challenges and blockers. But the good news is, we're going to provide a framework to you today to overcome these challenges during the session. So as we are looking into the challenges, on the flip side, the field of generative AI is advancing at an unprecedented pace. A fun fact is, a new model is released every 2.5 days. Most of the models today support multimodality, such as text, vision, and audio. And then they come up with new tools, frameworks, and capability that are being released in the market. If you look in the middle, the typical use cases that organizations are experimenting and creating industry-specific use cases and solutions are along the lines of text generation and summarization, scenarios being creating drafts, marketing content, chatbots and AI assistants where they employ RAG pattern to ground their enterprise data, examples being call center analytics, consumer shopping assistants, and HR assistants, code generation, for example, like GitHub Copilot, where you can leverage your Copilot to assist in software development process, and then some simple task automations like we do it in Teams, where we can transcript calls to convert into tasks and actions. But in reality, if you look at the next evolution of generative AI use cases, it's all about agentic systems. A few things to note about agentic systems are they sit alongside your teams and organizations to handle simple to complex multi-step business processes. But there are some key drivers to this. If we look at the key technical enablers, it needs to have a sophisticated reasoning capability. Today, agents can use reinforcement learning to identify the steps it takes to come to a specific outcome and how they derived it and learn from that process to increase the knowledge and the accuracy. Similarly, it needs to have a large context window. This means large amount of data readily available to learn from. So the data governance and data strategy becomes very crucial and foundational to achieve this. Additionally, it needs to be specialized. So what this means is it needs to sit very close to your business domain. So think of examples like sales agents, HR agents, procurement agents that can learn the specialities of the domain by working closely with the SMEs and with human interaction. And finally, it needs to support multimodality like text, audio, and video. As the spectrum of these agents' capabilities are varying from no agent to single agent to autonomous agents, so it brings in more complexity. So what you need to keep in mind is you need to have a robust and reliable foundation, which becomes paramount in building and scaling your AI systems. If we look at few of the fundamental questions that our customers are asking in the last 12 to 8 months, so just to summarize few of them, like what does it mean to be AI ready? How do I optimize my landing zone to really scale or secure my solution? What are the data co-location considerations I need to have for optimum performance? How do I manage cost proactively and my performance of my AI solution all the way from experimentation to operationalization? And finally, the network infrastructure that is required to drive high throughput and low latency. So what we did as we were addressing these questions and building some best practices was we packaged all of these learnings into something called Azure Essentials. So think of Azure Essentials as a framework for our customers like you to really improve the security, reliability, and the ongoing performance of their AI investments. This is a comprehensive framework that encapsulates people, process, and technology best practices so that you are adopting AI and you can employ these best practices along the way at every single stage, wherever you are, so that you can get the benefits and then scale quickly. The topics that are underneath these are something that we got from customer signals. So under readiness and foundation, the top of mind was what readiness and foundation we need to invest in. What are the various FinOps processes that need to be available for me to manage costs for my AI investments? What new skills that are required for our data scientists? Under design and governance, it was all about accelerators and best practices that are available to jumpstart my AI journey. Like, are there any mature processes that we can use for AI ops and Gen AI ops? And then finally, in manage and optimize, it was all about remediation, reliability, and then ongoing optimization and maintenance of their infrastructure. So all of these, like if we can look into like what does it mean from an AI-ready infrastructure perspective, these are the 5 core pillars that dictate how to architect a reliable and cost-effective solution that is fit for purpose. As you can see, there are a lot of options under each of these boxes. So it may look complex and daunting at first, but based on our learnings, we have created accelerators and baseline architectures by use case that will help you guide to make the right decision, which will be covered during the session for a single use case. So we looked at customers who are leveraging these patterns and analyzed over 300 plus customer engagements. And we found out that more than 65% of our customers are proactively investing in AI-ready infrastructure to rapidly scale and secure their solutions. And few statistics to support these numbers are more than 65% of our customers are deploying a dedicated landing zone, so they have better control over manageability and cost predictability. Around 45% use blob storage so that they can bring their unstructured data to index and vectorize for knowledge mining use cases. More than 50% of the customers are securing their platform end-to-end using Defender for Cloud, Key Vault, and Sentinel. Around 46% of the customer optimize their network service using private endpoints, VNet peering, and ExpressRoute. And finally, less than 50% of our customers use Azure Monitor and log analytics to manage performance, cost, and prevent malicious AI activities. So based on these customer signals and insights, so what everyone is asking for is a framework that will help navigate these complexities of future architecture and platform innovation. This is a great segue to hand it off to Stephen to share more on frameworks and best practices.
Thank you, Praveen. My name is Stephen Sumner, and I am on the Azure Patterns and Practices team here at Microsoft, and we are the team behind the Cloud Adoption Framework, the Well-Architected Framework, and Azure Architecture Center. And so I want to focus on the AI guidance we have available to you in those resources. Now, if you're not familiar with the Cloud Adoption Framework, Well-Architected Framework, and Azure Architecture Center, these are 3 distinct collections of guidance that serve 3 distinct purposes. But when used together, they meet the needs of different teams across your organization. So Praveen just surveyed the AI landscape. He did a fantastic job. And so what I'm going to do is show you the guidance we have to navigate that landscape and how to put all the pieces together to be successful. So what we have done is assembled AI guidance on how to adopt, design, and implement AI. And we put that guidance in the Cloud Adoption Framework, Well-Architected Framework, and Azure Architecture Center. So these resources collectively are going to be your proven entry point into AI. All right, so what do we have in terms of AI guidance? Well, in the Cloud Adoption Framework, we have a collection of articles called the AI Adoption Scenario. and it provides recommendations that are applicable to your entire organization and cloud estate. In the well-architected framework, we have a set of guidance for workload teams called the AI workload. And this is going to give you foundational design guidance to build AI workloads the right way. And then in the Azure Architecture Center, we have architectures and guides for a variety of different use cases that you can use to deploy and implement real solutions in Azure. Now, the well-architected framework AI workload in the middle there is going to have a separate session dedicated to it. So what I'm going to do is focus on the Cloud Adoption Framework and the Azure Architecture Center AI guidance. I'm going to give you a little bit more detail on each and then show you what we have in each of them. All right, let's start with the AI adoption scenario in the Cloud Adoption Framework. So this collection of guidance is going to provide an end-to-end roadmap for adopting and maintaining AI. It's going to facilitate technology-specific adoption and help you establish standards across your teams. It's also going to serve as a resource hub to help you find the architecture, design, and configuration guidance you need when you need it in your journey. So let's check that out. So here is the main Cloud Adoption Framework page. And to find the AI adoption guidance I've been referencing, you're going to click on the Overview button. And that's going to send you into a separate overview article. And if you look on the scenarios on the left and click on AI adoption, that's going to take you to a separate page dedicated to this AI adoption guidance. Now, the articles on the left, they align with the diagram here in the center. And this diagram shows you how to work through the guidance. AI adoption is a 6-step process with Govern AI, Manage AI, and Secure AI being iterative processes that you establish early on, but continue over time. And that's why they're there at the end. What you'll also notice is that this process aligns with the Azure Essentials framework that Praveen just mentioned, and it's, of course, grounded in the responsible AI principles. All right, so we're still on the overview page, but if we scroll down a bit on that page, you're going to see that we have 2 AI checklists to help you methodically move through AI adoption. There is an enterprise checklist, and that gives enterprises everything they need to adopt AI at their scale. And then there's a startup checklist, and startups are going to get a quicker path toward production, but still get that essential governance, management, and security best practices. All right, so let's dive into the process a bit. That first step in the process is developing an AI strategy. In here, you're going to learn how to prepare your organization for AI adoption. First, you identify use cases, figure out where AI can provide value in your business, and identify any known requirements for those use cases. Then you're going to turn to this decision tree, and it's going to help you figure out whether you should build or buy an AI solution and which service to use for that use case. Whatever service you land on here in this decision tree, you need to validate that selection. And to validate, you look at the skills needed for that service, the data required, and the cost factors to be successful. And there's guidance in the article to help you make those decisions. Okay, moving on to the AI plan step. This is the second step. And this article outlines the tactical process to move AI use cases toward production. In it, you're going to learn how to assess AI skills and any gaps in your organization. You're going to find tools and resources to fill those gaps, develop proof of concepts, and then implement responsible AI. And as part of implementing responsible AI, you're going to now establish the Govern AI, Manage AI, and Secure AI processes. And we'll touch more on these in just a bit. All right, so if a use case requires you to build in Azure, you need to move on to the third step and get AI ready. So what this means is you're going to be preparing your AI environment and establishing the right foundation. This foundation is going to help you properly govern, manage, and secure your AI workloads. And resource organization is critical to this foundation because it allows you to isolate your internal workloads from your internet-facing workloads. And it also facilitates policy-driven governance, which is really the key to adopting AI reliably in Azure. So if you don't know where to start with all of this, I highly encourage you to check out Azure Landing Zone because you're going to get built in a lot of our best practices right out of the box. And you can see a conceptual architecture of an Azure landing zone pictured here. All right, so we're still in the AI ready step for a build scenario. Now, once you have your AI foundation in place, you really have two options to build AI workloads in Azure. You have Azure Platforms and Azure Infrastructure, and you're going to choose the right one depending on your use case. In this presentation, I'm going to focus on Azure Platforms. And by Azure Platforms, what I'm referring to are services like Azure AI Foundry, Azure OpenAI, Azure Machine Learning, and Azure AI Services. And this is where the AI adoption guidance serves as a resource hub to find other guidance that you need. So you're going to find links to generative AI architectures and guides, non-generative AI architectures and guides, and then you're also going to use these design areas for technology-specific adoption. Think Azure Platforms versus infrastructure services, and to see what standards we recommend for those types of services. So if we look at the governance design area, for example, you're going to get guidance on how to govern AI models, costs, platforms, security, operations, and data for those Azure Platform services like AI Foundry and others that I just mentioned. Now let's move to the higher level iterative processes that I mentioned earlier. So we're no longer thinking technology specific, and we're actually looking at the entire organization now, and these recommendations are applicable no matter what type of AI you adopt. So Govern AI is going to show you how to assess AI organizational risk. You're going to use the responsible AI principles as a framework for assessing AI risks in your business. And then you're going to document your AI governance policies. And we have recommendations here tied to different policy areas like monitoring AI models and using third-party tools. And then you're going to enforce those policies and monitor compliance over time. So at a high level, that is the Govern AI process. All right, let's move on to Manage AI. This article outlines the operational areas you should work through pre and post deployment. There's a lot here, but I just want to touch on two major points. You want to pick an AI operational framework that's relevant for your workload. So MLOps for machine learning and GenAIOps for generative AI. This not only affects your operations and skill sets needed, but it also impacts your architecture. So MLOps focuses on training the model with a heavy emphasis on that side of the equation. And then GenAIOps focuses on controlling model outputs. You also want to figure out who's responsible for governing, managing, securing, and deploying your AI resources. And you have two primary options here. You can use a workload team approach for faster development. This gives autonomy to the workload to use AI resources as they see fit within governance boundaries, of course. And this is our recommended approach for most workloads. But you might be in an organization or an industry that has heightened requirements for AI, especially for governance. And so you can have a central AI team manage these AI resources for greater control and governance. And a service like Azure AI Foundry is actually built to accommodate this team structure with its concepts of hubs and projects. Okay, so let's manage AI at a high level. All right, then the secure AI process is similar to governance, but it focuses on mitigating risks to AI technology. First, you're going to assess AI security risks. And there are really some good resources out there for tracking these risks as they emerge. So I encourage you to use those. And once you realize those risks, you're going to start securing your AI resources. If you are building in Azure, use the Azure Security Baselines and Azure Service Guides. They are phenomenal resources. And if you're not building workloads in Azure, make sure you follow the security recommendations of your service. All right, then you need to secure your AI data. And you're going to do that by making sure you maintain data boundaries on your RAG data. You're going to ensure strong access controls. And you're going to use tools like Microsoft Purview to catalog your data. And finally, you want to maintain those security controls over time through testing, training, and planning. All right, so that's the secure AI process. And I just want to point out one final resource that we have, And this is how to establish an AI Center of Excellence. Now, this can be a standalone team or an extension of your Cloud Center of Excellence. But really, it's just a way to standardize your AI adoption, get everyone on board, and centralize AI expertise. Okay, so that is the AI adoption scenario in the Cloud Adoption Framework. Let's move on to the AI architectures and guides in the Azure Architecture Center. So here you're going to find implementation guidance for generative AI and non-generative AI use cases. You're going to get code assets and even full apps that you can deploy and learn from. You'll also find in-depth guides on specific technical topics like RAG and how to build architectures to support Gen AI apps and ML apps. All right, so let's check it out. So here's the main landing page for the Azure Architecture Center. And if you scroll down on that page to the technology areas, you're going to find the AI and machine learning box. And in that box, you're going to select AI architecture design. And that's going to send you to a separate view that contains all of our AI and ML guidance. And if you search through the articles on the left, you're going to find generative and non-generative AI articles. And I'm highlighting here the guides we have on developing things like a RAG solution, multi-tenant or multi-customer RAG solutions, ML ops, and how to proxy Azure OpenAI usage. All really, really helpful topics. Now, if we look at the available generative AI architectures, we have 3 chat baseline architectures that use generative AI. There's a basic architecture for proof of concepts and getting started. There's a production-ready architecture, and then there's guidance on how to plug that production-ready architecture into an Azure landing zone. These are all phenomenal resources. Now, that's just a brief peek at all the AI and ML guidance we have in the Azure Architecture Center. I really encourage you to explore more for yourself. There's a lot in there that I didn't cover, as you can see. I'm going to hand it off to Rajani, who's going to talk about these architectures and some other topics in more depth.
Thank you, Stephen. My name is Rajni Janakiram. I'm the tech strategy lead for AI-ready infrastructure with the customer success unit within Microsoft. The reason why I say my team's name is because this is essentially what we are focused on. A bunch of CSAs and PMs just focused on making sure that our customers are successful while we are using our Azure products, and specifically in this case, AI-ready products. Starting with design and govern. So the way Stephen described, we have our CAF guidance where we've specifically documented across design areas what are best practices. But essentially, when you come down to actual implementation, we wanted to make things slightly easier for you. This is where you might already be familiar with what we call as Azure Landing Zone. Now, think about landing zones as your cloud city's master blueprint. Think of it as zoning laws, infrastructure setup, and city-wide utilities all sort of rolled into one. It's essentially a master print, but for your cloud city with all the cool tech perks. Now, just like any city needs rules to keep things organized, your cloud city also needs policies to ensure everything functions properly. This is specifically focused on ensuring that we're protecting your sensitive data and making sure that your AI systems are used responsibly, especially with the context of the way the world is running in right now, where we are constantly at the threat of being attacked by hackers and essentially bad actors. This is super critical so that you have your foundations and your guardrails set in place in order to prevent your infrastructure, your applications, as well as your final end users from any sort of threats that can essentially come your way. Policies, you're setting boundaries in a way that any new application that also gets added. So you may start with one chatbot, but eventually want to expand your AI print on Azure with your customers to multiple other chatbots. Maybe you want to create a document processing system. So as much as you want to add more resources into Azure, all of these new resources will also make sure that they're aligning to these policies. Think of this as an example where today all of our context of conversation will revolve around a company called Contoso and a chatbot that we're creating for the end users. Now, one, you want to make sure that you're handling your customers' inquiries securely. So, anytime a customer is asking for some information as part of your chatbot interaction, you want to make sure the customer's data is well protected, be it their name, the item that they're purchasing, their card details, etc. And that also results in building trust with your employees and setting up these compliance standards. We also want to make sure that we are automating any deployment and management processes. So essentially, your engineers, your infrastructure admins can focus on just creating high value activities and leave these autonomous activities to our policies that are already set in place. And as your Contoso's customer database grows, you also want to make sure that your chatbot is able to scale seamlessly. And say, for example, you're looking at a holiday season where you're expecting like from 1,000 users, you are expecting like 5x times usage. You want to make sure that your chatbot, even at that point, performs effectively, is not crashing down on the customers, and also want to make sure we don't damage the app's reputation. So these principles, for example, are set into place with policies that we've defined, and we'll go into a quick demo in just a little bit. Now, the new policies that we have defined for specifically AI revolves around the 4 services. One is Azure OpenAI, 2, Azure AI Search, 3, bots service, as well as machine learning. So based on our experience of working with hundreds of customers in the past couple of months, we have defined what are best practices for these specific services. And the moment you turn on these policies for your deployment, you're also incorporating all of these best practices and learnings into your subscription, into your management group. So that even if a new person joins your organization, say 6 months down the lane, and this person is not aware of all the goodness that you've already identified, we're preventing them from making a mistake. We're preventing them from affecting your actual end users with security incidents, and also be helping them to scale in a way that we know has worked with multiple customers in the past. Now, all of this is fine. These are all guidances that you can implement, going through documentation, going through the portal experience, and understanding what policies mean. But what would make things easier is to have an accelerator, which is precisely what we've done, because deploying AI solutions comes with a lot of challenges. One is ensuring infrastructure readiness, being able to scale appropriately, and also maintaining these governance policies across your environment. And what we've done is created an accelerator which provides a pre-configured landing zone, which is designed for OpenAI deployments. And it also aligns with the cloud adoption framework and the well-architected frameworks that Stephen had already mentioned. So that way, deploy this solution. It's a GitHub repository currently documented in Bicep. You deploy it and you get all the goodness in a matter of few minutes. One of the most time-consuming tasks is ensuring compatibility with existing environments. So as you add new solutions into your environment, we want to make sure it aligns with what you've already created in your landing zone. And this accelerator eliminates that friction by seamlessly integrating one with your platform landing zone, allowing you to deploy faster while staying consistent with your organizational standards. And these pre-configured services also ensure that you don't need to manually optimize or adjust your compute, storage, or networking layers. And these are all learned from the best practices that customers have shared with us in the past. So we are able to optimize for performance while adhering to compliance as well as security standards. Again, one thing to note is this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. It is built for scalability and reliability. So whether you're running a proof of concept sort of chatbot, or at some point you decide to scale it to a production chatbot, this architecture takes care of it all. It has got provisions for you to scale in a way that you want to, or scale down in a way that you want to. For the first accelerator that we built, the scenario that we picked is a chatbot, which is also one of the most commonly used applications on Azure. Without this accelerator, you would essentially be spending weeks trying to configure this. Instead, you can configure this in a matter of few minutes, or and set up an infrastructure that is already ready to scale and built securely as well. And with that, we're going to go into a quick demo of what we just went through, the accelerator as well as the policies. What we're seeing on the screen right now is the Azure Landing Zone Accelerator, which has been around for a really long time. Most of you guys might be already familiar. This is a template that deploys the base foundation on top of which you can build any application. Now, what we're going to go through is specifically for AI, the 4 new policies that we have introduced for bot, search, machine learning, and OpenAI. Let's take a look at the OpenAI initiative right here. So this is an explanation of all the new policies that we've introduced for the service. So for example, we have said that all Azure AI services and resources should restrict network access. So the default is audit, and you can also customize it to say whether it needs to be denied, disabled, etc. So what happens when you choose and turn on this policy is, if you have any resource within your OpenAI realm that does not have a restricted network access, it will flag you till you go fix it. And this makes sure that any new resource that gets added, even say 6 months into the timeline of enabling this application, also gets flagged. As a network admin who's responsible for turning this on, you will get notified when a resource that you're creating is not meeting this timeline. As an infrastructure admin, if your focus is on governance, you are able to, one, get a list of all the resources that are not meeting this, say on a monthly basis, and send out a report and make a clear and conscious decision of why it is okay, if it is okay. Or request your network admin to make changes if you feel like this is not how you want your applications to be set up and eventually shared to your customer as well. So this is the architecture center, where we have documented some basic architecture references for AI, starting with what we call the basic architecture. This is meant for POC sort of situation. So this is not meant for scale. This still does have security guidelines in place, but essentially if you're just trying to show that, hey, this is how we can deploy a chatbot and simulate an experience that you want to just validate in Azure, trying to see what the experience would look like, this is a well-defined POC architecture. But in case you want to move into production, our recommendation is either to use a baseline architecture if you're not using an Azure Landing Zone. But our recommendation for foundation is always Azure Landing Zone. So the third solution here, which think of all of these architectures as sort of building on top of each other. So we will create an architecture using AI Foundry and all the relevant resources like storage, Key Vault, networking, etc., which is like a pre-configured setup that you can go also up for editing in case you want to make changes. You can go customize as well, or just use as is to get started very quickly on Azure. So for the purpose of the demo, we have obviously pre-deployed the accelerator that I just spoke about. So this is a chat bot that is deployed in an Azure Landing Zone, which already takes into consideration all the design areas that we were talking about. What this chatbot does and the flow that we've defined is, one, it creates the chatbot workflow. This is where you design how the chatbot will respond to user questions using prompt flow in Azure AI Foundry. And then we deploy this chatbot into a managed system on Azure Machine Learning Endpoint. And this system ensures that the chatbot runs smoothly and users can interact with it through a user interface hosted on Azure App Service. Alternatively, you can also host the chatbot and its interface directly on an app service, giving you more control over how it runs and is accessed. This is the resource group that gets created as part of the deployment. You will see a bunch of resources that are already created with configurations that we have predefined as part of the Bicep template. Moving on to the architecture itself, you will see how these resources are connected. We have a jump box that we have created as part of the deployment. So this ensures that except for people who are accessing it from the jump box, you are not able to access the AI Foundry. So that adds an additional layer of security in who gets to change what as part of your chatbot application. So You do not want disgruntled employees, say for example, to make changes and affect thousands of your users. So this makes sure that only people who are supposed to have access to the AI Foundry and in effect your chatbot is able to go through this one as well. Now, how do we go about testing this chatbot? You would ideally go into the AI hub, and then you will click on Launch Azure AI Foundry. And then you would expect ideally to see something and make changes. And this is where you will see an error. And this is expected because just like I said, we will have to log in through the jump box because that is the first layer of security that we've built into the system. Now, the ideal way to go do this would be go back to your resource group and then look at the jump box, which is basically the virtual machine that we have created. And then connect to this via Bastion. So by default, as part of the bicep template, the username is VMadmin, but you can obviously customize it and enter the name that you're familiar with, and then try and log in right here. So this essentially opens up our access to the jump box and through which we will log into the AI Foundry hub, where you will have access to see how the chatbot essentially works. So this is the Azure AI Foundry. Now we have access to this because we are logging in through the jump box. What you see here in the prompt flow is how a question that we direct to the chatbot is accessed. So the first thing is the chatbot through the UI that we created gets a question from a customer or a user. The next thing is this query that the customer has shared is extracted in a form and fashion that the model understands. And then it goes to Wikipedia because that's a sample architecture. So essentially we are querying against Wikipedia to find answers. Now this Wikipedia can be replaced by any database that you would want. Say, for example, you're running a chatbot where your customers are going to interact with to find out prices of a specific item. So your database in that case would have tables which will talk about this item, this is the price, or this discount is applicable, or what sizes are available, or when is the delivery, etc. So all of these questions and database values can be customized based on what your application is. And based on the query, the right response, in this case, the right Wikipedia URL is retrieved. And then from that Wikipedia URL, based on the question, the right answer is generated. And then this answer is converted into a form and fashion that the final end user will understand, which is basically where it's augmented. And then finally, it's sent as a response back to our application as an output. So this is the flow of how the chatbot functions. And again, you can configure all of these to function in a way that suits your application. So say, for example, we have in this case used GPT 3.5 as the version, but say if you want to use another version, you're free to do that and you can customize that. And you can also customize how these responses are augmented and, make it in a way that is appropriate for your user base as well. Now, with that, we've gone through how the application is deployed and what the sample application looks like in terms of an architecture that we just explained. The next step is going to be trying this out. So as part of the deployment, we created a contesto.com website. And then let's ask our chatbot a question about, say, give me 3 lines about Microsoft. So essentially what happens at this point is this is the query, goes back to Wikipedia, retrieves the right URL that has information about Microsoft, and then looks at the question again because we said 3 lines, and that response in itself is augmented to adapt to the question that we asked. And at this point, we should ideally get a good response back from Wikipedia. Okay. And it's given us a good summary of what Microsoft is. It has given us essentially just 3 lines because that's what we asked. But say, for example, if you go to an actual Wikipedia page about Microsoft, you will see a big page with multiple paragraphs and different kinds of details, but it understands what we're asking and customizes it to give the response that we're expecting as well. So we went through how policies protect and help your final end users as well as your admins from making mistakes that can cost you dearly. And we also looked at how the accelerator easily deploys a solution for you, which is a chatbot in this case. But please do note that we're also working on other scenarios like document processing and video processing, so it should come your way very quickly. Now, for any application, it goes through like 3 stages, starting with strategy plan, moving to design governance, and then there is a continuous need to manage and optimize your solution. And optimize means in terms of security, in terms of cost, as well as how do you monitor how your applications are performing and where you want to make changes. So that is what we're going to cover in the next couple of minutes right here. Starting with security, again, this year and the previous year, one of the big focus for Microsoft itself has been how do you secure by design and how do you secure by default, which means just as much as we are investing in Azure services to be secure, we are also investing in making sure that the solutions that we provide for our customers, as well as architects who are interacting with you in building these solutions, are thinking of security as P0. Starting with confidentiality. So we need to make sure in the case of Contoso chatbot that only Contoso employees can access customer data, chat logs, etc., preventing unauthorized and unintended data exposure. So your customers are protected irrespective of who joins your company at what point of time, because you're clearly defining the boundaries for customer data access. Then the next step is to protect integrity. In this case, making sure that the customers who are using this chatbot get trustworthy responses. So no person who has access to your chatbot is able to generate responses that are harming the customer in any way or using words that we do not want to communicate with your actual end users as well. So these can be implemented by jailbreak risk detection, which is part of our AI solutions as well, and making sure that the regular integrity checks that prevents chatbot manipulation and that your customers are getting consistent responses as is expected by your end user. The last thing being protecting availability. So say, for example, you have a big festival coming up where you're expecting your customer base to grow. At that point, you do not want somebody to be sending, like, say, 100,000 requests and breaking your system in a way that actual users are not getting any response. So this can essentially prevent denial of service attacks by limiting the number of requests per user. And you may have seen this while you're using, say, for example, ChatGPT as well. It has a limit of number of requests that you can send in a day. So similarly, you can define total number of requests per user or per a specific time frame. In this way, you can ensure service availability during peak times without creating any disruptions for your end user as well. Now, AI can get really expensive if you are not aware of where you're incurring costs, if you're not aware of how to reduce costs as well. This is where our cost management comes into play. Now, starting with pricing calculator, which is basically the first step before you even think about deploying resources, so that you can get an idea of how much are you planning to incur, get some initial approvals from your CXOs before you move forward. That is the first steps. But as you move forward with your deployment, looking at your architecture and looking at your resource group, for example, and identifying how much cost are you incurring, say, in a month, and then estimating based off of that for the next financial year, for example, is a great way to make sure you're contained in terms of your cost and not hitting big surprises later. Optimizing the resource usage, so enabling idle shutdown or auto scaling so that you're not really bringing up resources during a low usage time and just incurring costs, versus scale up during a festive season so that you're able to address customer needs as well. Finally, coming down to using the right billing model. So whether it is pay as you go or pay through usage, depending on how busy your application gets and how much load are you expecting, so that you may be a small startup and then you want to use a pay as you go. So where you're trying to define cost based on usage, or you're a big enterprise and you want to do a mix of both. So depending on what your requirements are, as well as your appetite for how much cost you're okay incurring, you can choose between the billing models. and making sure that you're not leaving any unused resources, which might seem like, hey, this is something that everybody should be doing. But as we work with customers, this is one of the most common scenarios where people incur costs because somebody forgot to delete an instance of OpenAI that is not being used and it's just sitting there and just adding onto your cost. So making sure that you're targeting cost management from all of these aspects is extremely critical so that you are not hitting surprises later and you're optimizing the money that you're spending for the right set of resources and for your business needs as well. Now, the way to do cost management or anything in your Azure infrastructure continuously is to make sure you monitor. We have this saying, if you're not monitoring it, you're not measuring it. If you're not measuring it, then you're not doing anything about it. So starting with proactive alerting, say for example, if the chatbot is taking too long to respond to user queries, we need to have an alert that notifies Contour's support team, one to investigate and essentially identify what the issue is and then fix them. So you can also configure it in a way that you're defining that 5 of your IT admins should get an email notification or a phone call, say for example, based on the severity of the incident. And having these alerts automated so that emails are being sent in a specific format. It is also categorized with severity based on some pre-configured definitions, and having some of these guided insights documented. So saying that, hey, if you get an alert that a chatbot is taking more than 5 seconds to respond, then do X. So having these alerts documented with actual guidance of a, say, for example, a troubleshooting guide is also a best practice that we definitely encourage customers to use. To make this easier, we have come up with a solution called Azure Monitor Baseline Alerts. We will be going into a demo of that in just a little bit. This is essentially pre-configured alerts for AI services based on our conversations with multiple customers as well as product group to say, here are the top alerts that we think you should use, and an easier way to implement that into Azure Monitor so you're not manually going and customizing this. Now, once you monitor this, the next step is to make sure that you're implementing reliability measures into your system in case something goes wrong. So in case your chatbot is taking too long to respond, do you need to come up with a strategy there where you have multiple instances taking the load of these requests in case of an overloaded scenario? Or say, for example, something really goes wrong in case of a disaster scenario. Like a region went down, we are affected by storms all the time. So in case a region is going down where you have your Azure resources, but say, for example, your end users are in a completely different continent. So having a disaster recovery setup in place, make sure that you're not losing large amounts of data, because especially when it comes to training models, you're talking about petabytes of data that you've trained and you do not want to lose this data. So creating snippets in a separate region so that you can bring back your application on time, and having redundancy, so you're diverting traffic in a way that your system can actually manage it, and also accounting for deployment and capacity so that you have these quotas for compute, say for example, allocated to your subscription early on, so that when your IT admin is actually going to do an implementation, you're not getting a quota error. And again, having this on a need to basis is also important so that you're not wasting resources that you don't really need. With that, we will go into the final demo. So we've introduced a new scenario for under artificial intelligence for GPT-RAG, where all the key services that are usually connected with, say, for example, a chatbot deployment have already been identified. So say, for example, you're going to cognitive services, and here one of the metric that we defined is that the total number of calls that are going to this service, in case reaches more than 5,000, you get an alert. So this is automatically configured with your Azure Monitor, which means in a scenario where a bad actor is trying to overload your system and break your chatbot, at this point, you will get an alert. Now, 5,000 is the number that we have defined, but this is customizable, and all of this is available in a way that you can directly plug into Azure Monitor, so that makes things easier for you. Going back to Azure Proactive Resiliency Library, this is where the ideal configurations of setting up DR, setting up redundancy, all of that is already configured. So in case you have a resource that is not meeting any of these recommendations, say for example, planning for a multi-region deployment for Azure Machine Learning and associated resources is the right way to do this. Now, in case you do not have something like this, then we will have these alerts configured, and this is an impact high. So you will get notifications anytime this is not happening, you'll be flagged, and your admin can actually go make the decisions as to why this is not done. Maybe you do not have a mission critical workload, or in case this is a miss, you can work with your actual application owners and get this fixed as well. So this way you're covered both in terms of monitoring as well as making sure you're set in a way that you're protected against disaster recovery as well as security incidents that can always be expected in your environment. Now we've gone through all the solutions that we've built on top of Azure products, which can help accelerate your deployment and growth of AI journey on Azure. But to help you further, we also have Azure Essentials, but you can take a snippet of the QR code and reach out to us, which will help you, one, innovate how to infuse AI solutions into Azure systems, and also help you migrate and modernize. And we have had experience with over 10,000 projects being delivered with various customers and even more in the pipeline. So you can use all of these best practices and learnings that we've had from other customers to your advantage and treat this as a one-stop shop to help your customers achieve their cloud goals for either new or existing deployments. With that, we come to the end of our presentation, and hopefully you've learned something and will be able to use this in your upcoming customer engagements as well. On behalf of me, Praveen, as well as Stephen, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.